On a lonely stretch of deserted highway, Clint stumbles upon an abandoned dog. What happens next is an unexpected act of kindness that will not only surprise him but change his life forever. The highway stretched endlessly under the fading sun, the hum of passing cars filling the cold evening air. Clint Eastwood gripped the wheel of his old pickup, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He had a place to be, a Hollywood event in Los Angeles, but something in the distance caught his attention. A shape, small, unmoving. Instinct kicked in. Clint eased off the gas and pulled over, his tires crunching against the gravel. As he stepped out, the wind bit through his jacket. Lying in the middle of the road was a dog, thin, shivering, its fur matted with dirt and dried blood. Clint knelt beside the trembling animal, his weathered hands brushing gently over its ribs. "You've been through hell, huh?" he muttered. The dog flinched, but didn't run. It was too weak. Cars sped by, their headlights flashing indifferently. Not one stopped. Clint exhaled, a weight settling in his chest. He had seen a lot in his time. Wars, loss, the slow erosion of things that mattered. But right now, none of it seemed more important than the creature struggling for life in front of him. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and pressed it against a wound on the dog's leg. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered. "I got you." The dog, though still weak, seemed calmer now, almost as if it had been waiting for Clint all along. As he gently ran his hand over its dirt-matted fur, his fingers brushed against something cold, a collar tag. Squinting in the dim light, he tried to make out the name when a voice interrupted him. "Been watching that mutt shiver for days," a man muttered, stepping closer from the sidewalk. Clint glanced up, his eyes narrowing. "And you just stood there?" The man shrugged. "Figured it was sick or something, didn't want to touch it." Clint exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Yeah, real compassionate of you." The stranger scoffed, shifting uncomfortably under Clint's glare. "Whatever, man. That thing could be diseased." Without another word, Clint turned back to the dog, brushing dirt off the tag. "Mel," he sighed. "You're safe now, Mel." The stranger lingered a second longer, then, realizing he wasn't getting the last word, muttered something under his breath and walked away. Someone had once cared enough to name this dog, but where were they now? Had they abandoned him, or had something happened to them? The thought sat heavy in Clint's chest, but one thing was clear. Mel had been left to fend for himself. The dog let out a faint whimper, shivering against the cold. Clint traced his fingers over a deep wound on Mel's leg, his jaw tightening. "Damn, looks bad, buddy. We need to get you to a vet," Clint said. Without hesitation, he scooped Mel into his arms, careful not to hurt him. The dog barely resisted, too weak to fight, too trusting to fear Clint. He carried him to his truck, settling him gently on the passenger seat. He pulled out his phone, searching for the nearest pet clinic. Nothing. The desert stretched around him, empty and unforgiving. Clint started the engine and hit the road, his Hollywood event forgotten. The city lights were still far off, the clock ticking down to when he was supposed to be on stage. But right now, none of that mattered. He pressed the gas a little harder. After searching again, Clint finally found a pet clinic nearby. Without hesitation, he turned the wheel and sped toward it. As he pulled up, he barely put the truck in park before stepping out, gently lifting Mel into his arms. "All right, buddy, let's get you patched up," he murmured, glancing down at the dog. Despite the pain, Mel's tail gave a weak wag as if he knew he was finally safe. Inside, the scent of antiseptic filled the air. A vet was busy examining another pet, so Clint took a seat in the waiting area, cradling Mel carefully. The dog nestled into his lap, his small, battered body pressing close for warmth and comfort. Clint found himself absently running his fingers through Mel's fur, murmuring quiet reassurances. It was strange. He had never been the kind of man to get attached easily, but something about this dog, this moment, felt different. Mel sighed, resting his head against Clint's arm. Yeah, this little guy had been waiting for someone. And maybe, Clint realized, so had he. The receptionist, a teenage boy, called out, "Mr. Clint, you're next." He didn't seem to recognize the name, but the doctor sure did. His eyes widened as he stepped forward. "Wait, are you serious? Clint Eastwood? Damn, sir, I've been a fan since I was a kid." Clint gave a small nod. "Appreciate it, but I'm here for this poor soul." He gestured to Mel, cradled in his arms. "Found him in the desert. He's hurting." The doctor's excitement didn't stop him from getting to work. He took a quick look at Mel and nodded. "These wounds need to be cleaned and dressed before they get infected. Let's get started." Clint placed Mel on the table, watching as the doctor carefully disinfected and bandaged the wounds. Mel winced but didn't resist. "He'll need a proper bath," the doctor added. "The dirt caked into his fur, and that could cause further irritation." Clint sighed. "I don't have a place here. Think you can handle it?" The doctor's eyes lit up like a kid meeting his hero. "I'll do it, but on one condition." Clint raised a brow. "Which is?" "I get your autograph." Clint smirked. "Fair trade." The doctor wasted no time, carefully washing Mel until his fur looked fresh and clean. The once exhausted dog now wagged his tail, looking up at Clint with gratitude. Clint signed an autograph, paid the bill, and gave the doctor a firm nod. "Thanks for this." "My pleasure, Mr. Eastwood," the doctor beamed. With Mel in his arms, Clint stepped out of the clinic, ready to figure out what came next. Clint sat in his truck, staring at the time ticking away. He glanced at the event details on his phone, knowing he was late. Clint had a reputation for punctuality, always arriving on time, sometimes even early. It was his principle. But today, things were different. He had gotten caught up helping a dog in need, and in that moment, something felt more important than his usual routine. Helping the dog, even at the cost of being late, meant something to Clint. When a man like him, known for his unwavering principles, bends them, it meant there was still humanity left in the world. He looked down at Mel, still nestled in the seat beside him. "It's time to give you a home, buddy," Clint muttered, his voice soft but resolute. "Now, and probably a goodbye." Clint began searching for a nearby shelter. He was surprised when he found only one in the entire city. In such a sprawling urban area, how could this be? One shelter for all the lost animals. Without hesitation, he drove straight to Pixie Shelter House. As he approached, the building looked far worse than he'd imagined. It was old, weathered, and in dire need of repair. The paint was peeling, and the windows looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years. But for Mel, it was better than the street. It had to be. Clint took Mel into his arms and walked towards the door. He knocked twice, the sound echoing in the quiet. The door creaked open slowly, and a sweet-faced woman appeared. "Yes, how can we help you?" she asked, her tone warm but cautious. Clint looked at Mel, his eyes softening. "I was wondering if there's space for this little dog," he said, his voice steady despite the weariness of the day. The lady looked at the dog, noticing the bandages, and invited him inside. "Please, take a seat at the reception. I'll check the records to see if we have any space available." Clint sat down, holding Mel, and watched as the woman turned to her computer. A moment later, she froze. Her gaze shifted to the bandages on Mel's side, and she turned back to Clint, a concerned look on her face. "Is there something wrong with this dog?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Clint nodded. "Yeah, I found him near the highway. He was in pretty bad shape." The receptionist's eyes widened as she looked at him, her confusion evident. "So, you stopped what you were doing and helped him out?" she asked, her tone almost disbelieving. Clint raised an eyebrow, the sharpness of her question catching him off guard. Had it really become so strange for someone to help? The thought surprised him. Without skipping a beat, he replied, "Yeah, just like someone helped me out when I nearly died in a crash during World War II. His words carried the weight of experience, a reminder that kindness and helping others weren't always so common anymore. The receptionist blinked, momentarily stunned. "Oh, sorry, I asked," she muttered, quickly turning back to her computer. Clint watched as she scrolled through the records, the clicking of the mouse filling the silence. Finally, she looked up at him. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice apologetic but firm. "We're at full capacity right now. There's no room for him." Clint's heart sank. He couldn't believe it. In a world full of people, there was nowhere for this dog to go. He stood up, a sense of helplessness creeping in. He had tried to do the right thing, and now it seemed like there was no place for Mel. As he walked out, Mel still nestled in his arms, Clint's gaze drifted to the road. The event was just 2 hours away, but as he looked at the road stretching out ahead, he knew he had a decision to make. He wasn't leaving this dog without a home, and he wasn't about to give up. Clint quickly got on his truck and kept driving, thinking that maybe he could find a shelter home in Los Angeles. As soon as he reached there and inquired for shelter houses, he was amazed to know that every shelter house was at full capacity. It made Clint furious. He understood what he had to do. He looked at Mel and said, "Seems like we're stuck with each other." At this heat of the moment, he adopted the dog. For Clint, it was a life-changing moment. He had never had a pet of his own. But it didn't end there. He wanted to do more. It wasn't just about Mel. He thought to himself how many dogs would have left astray just because the shelter homes didn't have capacity. And there was nothing shelter homes could do when people sponsor other things more than them. It is all about teamwork and giving priority to what matters the most. Clint wasn't one to waste time when he made up his mind. He pulled out his phone and dialed his investment company. "Hey, I've got a bungalow in Los Angeles. Can you turn it into an animal shelter?" he said, his voice steady with determination. The official on the other end hesitated. "Sir, that'll cost us quite a bit." "Doesn't matter. Just get it done." Clint cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. This wasn't about money, it was about doing the right thing. He hung up, his mind already focused on the next task. The shelter would become a reality, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. But as his gaze flicked to the clock, reality set in. The event he was supposed to attend was fast approaching. He felt a pang of panic. But then, with a sigh, he realized something. Luck was on his side. The venue wasn't far. He grabbed Mel, the little dog still by his side, and headed for the event. The moment Clint stepped into the event, the crowd took notice. "There's our special guest, Mr. Clint Eastwood. Let's give him a warm welcome," the host announced, and the audience erupted into applause. Despite his age, Clint's presence still commanded respect and admiration. But what was unusual was the small dog he cradled in his arms, a sight that left some whispers echoing through the crowd. "How can he bring a dog inside?" someone muttered under their breath. But the applause didn't falter, it only grew louder. Clint walked toward the stage, Mel in his arms, the crowd's eyes fixed on him. As he reached the podium, the host greeted him, but Clint held up his hand to pause the cheers. He needed to speak. "First off, I owe you all an apology," Clint began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of his words. "I've caused some inconvenience by being late, and here's the reason why." He lifted the dog high enough for the audience to see, a pitiful sight. Yet somehow, it made the moment even more powerful. He sighed, his gaze softening as he looked down at Mel. "I found this dog injured by the side of the road, and it made me think, how often do we care so much for people but forget the creatures who share this world with us?" The room fell into a stunned silence, the audience absorbing his words. Clint's eyes never wavered as he gazed at Mel, his concern palpable. Finally, a voice from the crowd broke the quiet. "We hear you, Clint. We know where we went wrong." Clint nodded, his expression thoughtful as he paused, looking out at the crowd. "I think we all need to do better, for the people and for the animals." His words lingered in the air, and for a moment it seemed like the entire room shared in the quiet resolve to change, not just for the sake of the world, but for the creatures who couldn't speak for themselves. Clint looked over the audience, his gaze steady. "Here's something that doesn't add up," he began, his voice calm but cutting. "We've got more stray dogs than we have shelters. That's the kind of world we're living in." The crowd fell quiet, the weight of his words sinking in. His next words carried a deeper sense of urgency. "I found this dog, Mel, on the side of the road, and I took him in. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. I could have kept going, but I didn't. It's easy to turn a blind eye, but I'm asking all of you, how many times do we ignore the suffering around us, whether it's animals or people?" The room was still. the silence almost reverent. Clint paused, letting the moment sit before he continued, his voice sharpening. We've got a lot of work to do, folks. If we want to fix this world, it starts with seeing those who need help and actually doing something about it. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient. Now. He looked directly at the crowd, his words carrying an unspoken challenge. We can't change the world in a day, but we can change how we see it. And if we all commit to that, we'll be on the path to something better. Clint stepped back, eyes sweeping across the audience. So, let's do it. Let's make sure the next time we see a need, we meet it. The world can't wait, and neither can we. With that, Clint turned, walked off the stage, and left the room, without waiting for further applause or recognition. His words lingering in the air, leaving an indelible impact. As he exited, the ripple effect of his message began to spread beyond the room. The clip was already gaining views online, with people reflecting on their own actions. It became clear to many that something vital had been overlooked. They had missed something simple, something crucial. There was more to life than just the people around them, and they needed to do better. If this story touched your heart, there's even more waiting for you. Tap the video on your screen to explore another powerful narrative that highlights compassion, change, and the difference we can make in the world. Don't wait. Your next transformative journey begins with just one click.